Daryl, I'm the 4-H agent in Henderson County. Today we're going to talk about 4-H embryology. And the eggs that we provide to the second grade classes are quail eggs. I'd like to show you a picture of a bobwhite quail, and you can listen to its call. Some birds are named after their calls, and so this bird is named bobwhite. A common bird that we hear around here is called a chickadee. It says chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. We buy our bobwhite quail eggs from Strickland Game Bird, and here's a picture of a baby chick when it's hatched. It's really interesting that the baby chicks always hatch the same exact way from the shells. In 4-H, we use the experiential learning model. We experience an activity and then talk about the results and the reactions and the observations, and we process those things, and then we generalize what we have learned. So one of the big things that children learn in 4-H embryology is responsibility. They're turning the quail eggs 3 times a day and recording the temperature and the humidity. And they're applying that responsibility to other areas of their lives. So this is an important thing about 4-H programs. The North Carolina Public Schools Essential Standards lists learning about life cycles in the second grade. So this is why we focus on this grade for 4-H embryology. One of the rules about animals in schools says that baby chicks and ducks are only allowed under the supervision of the Cooperative Extension Service. 4-H is the youth development program of Cooperative Extension, and Cooperative Extension is an outreach from the land-grant universities to the counties. So in North Carolina, our land-grant universities are NC State and North Carolina A&T University. One of the first things I want to tell you about embryology is about your janitors. They have some favorite outlets in the room where they like to plug in their vacuum cleaner. And if they come in and anything's plugged in their favorite outlet, they'll just unplug it and not really think about it. So it's important to put a sign near the outlet or on your cord. And it's also important to have a conversation with the janitor and say, please do not unplug the incubator. And one of the things that you're going to be looking for when you decide on where to put your incubator is a good spot. You want a firm table without the sun shining on it or heating or a cooling vent blowing on it, and you don't want it near an exterior door where it will get drafts. We love to get notes from the children that participate in 4-H embryology, and the only way that we could do this program is with volunteers every step of the way. So you will meet some of the volunteers somewhere in the 4-H program. About 60 second grade classes participate, usually about 1,000 students a year. In 2018, a grant from Community Foundation provided the brand new incubators that we're using. And 4-H fundraisers pay for the expenses each year, which total about $500 per year. Our big fundraiser is the 4-H plant sale in the spring. Here's Callie gathering shavings that we use to put in the bottom of the brooder boxes. We have 4-Hers help us repair incubators and count out the eggs. I order 500 quail eggs at a time, and then we divide them up by the number of classes we have and prepare them to deliver them to the schools. This is a 4-H club who prepared the eggs one year. I like to show this picture because this is Meredith Lombardo, who's now a teacher at Dana. We provide teacher training, curriculum, incubating equipment, and quail eggs. Volunteers deliver the eggs to the classes and give brief instructions. Here's a picture of me delivering quail eggs to the classroom. Teachers provide supervision for their classes each day as the children turn the eggs and record the temperature and humidity in the incubator. We usually provide an extra thermometer, but the thermometer in the incubator is the most accurate one, and that's the one you should use for these readings. It's very important when you get the eggs to wash your hands before and after you touch them. We have the children write X on one side and O on the other side. This will help you know which ones you've turned and which ones you haven't turned. Notice that this teacher has written a little sign that says incubator on her incubator. There's lots of good vocabulary words in 4-H embryology. Some of our teachers provide chicken eggs or other eggs, and we have not had a problem with this. You'll see the smaller eggs in this picture are the bobwhite quail eggs. Here's a picture of Larry turning the eggs. Make sure that the eggs are clean when you get them. If there's anything that you need to wash off with them, get a damp paper towel and just wipe it off. One of the last things that the hen's body applies to the egg before she lays it is a clear coating called a bloom or a cuticle, and you don't want to wash that off. It's antibacterial. What you do need to know is the number of days it will take for your eggs to hatch. Bobwhite quail eggs take 23 to 24 days. Chicken eggs take 21 days. Duck eggs take 28 days. And goose eggs take 30 days. So whatever kind of egg you get, it's important to know how many days it will take for it to hatch. The last 3 days for any of our eggs, we do not turn the eggs and we increase the humidity. So here's a picture that a student from Mountain Community School drew about candling the eggs. We provide candlers for each class, and starting on day 10, you should be able to clearly see if the eggs are fertile or not fertile. In this picture, they couldn't decide, so they named the egg Mr. Iffy and put it in a special place in the incubator. I normally keep the fertile eggs separate from the infertile eggs so that children can see that those infertile eggs will not hatch. When you candle the infertile egg, it looks clear and glows a pinkish yellowish color. If the egg is fertile, starting on day 10, you should be able to see veins, and soon you should be able to see the eye. It will look like a large black dot in there. I have emailed teachers curriculum, and one of the instructions in the 4-H curriculum is to make a homemade candler that you can place on an overhead projector, or you could use with your Elmo. In this way, the children can see the eggs from all sides, and they don't have your hand in the way with the candler. And you can see on this egg the veins starting to develop. When the chick first pokes its beak through the shell, it's called a pip or pipping. And the day before it pokes through the egg, it uses its beak to poke through the membrane. And you can actually hear the baby chicks start to peep then. And you'll know that they're going to hatch the next day. Also, that chick develops an egg tooth when it's time to hatch, and that egg tooth is only there for 24 hours. That 4-H curriculum that I emailed you has a picture of a chick with an egg tooth on there. Here's a picture of the brooder box that you'll need to prepare for the babies. It's very important for them to stay in the incubator until they're dry and fluffy. If it's 3 o'clock and they're hatching, it's okay to leave them in the incubator and go home. And it may take them 2 hours to get dry and fluffy. One of the last things that they do before they hatch is ingest the yolk inside their body, and they can live off that yolk for 2 or 3 days. So when they hatch, they don't have to immediately come out of the incubator. The most important thing for them is to stay dry and warm. So here in this picture of the brooder box, you'll see that there's a light shining down in the brooder box to keep the chicks warm. There's a water jar, and there's some toys down in there. This next picture has some more picture of the toys. This teacher put marbles inside her brooder box. Shiny toys attract the baby chicks, and they'll peck the toys, and that's better than pecking each other. If they do peck each other, sometimes they'll draw blood, and that's not a good thing. Before and after the children touch the eggs, and before and after they touch the chicks, they should wash their hands. They can hold the baby chicks. I recommend that they sit down on their bottom when they hold the baby chicks. If they were standing and they dropped a chick, that would just be farther for the baby chick to fall before it hits the floor. I was surprised about this. One year, some of our volunteers put a stuffed animal in there with the chicks, and they liked it. Mrs. Fisher from Hendersonville Elementary has a Think Outside the Box challenge for the kids each week. And one year she drew the outline of an egg, and one of the students drew her. I thought that was pretty cute. Here's a picture of the students looking in the brooder box. It's important with your brooder box for the light to shine down in it. So don't clamp the clamp light onto the edge of the brooder box. Clamp it onto a chair or a shelf or something horizontal. The brooder box needs to be big enough for the chicks to get under the light when they're cold and to get away from the light when they're hot. Here's a picture of some dry and fluffy and happy chicks. Occasionally, we do have chicks born with problems, and a teacher did some research on the internet one year, and one of the chicks had a problem with its leg. So she put kitchen shelf liner in the bottom of a plastic box, and the chick was in that box for about a day, and by the next day its legs were strengthened. It did need its own water, and she just set the smaller box down inside her brooder box. This is one of the classes at Sugarloaf. It's okay to let the students and the chicks do this for a short amount of time, but everybody needs to wash their hands before and after they touch the chicks. This is a picture of the valve, the red plug that comes with your incubator. It fits in a hole that's about a dime-sized hole. That red plug stays in your incubator for the first 6 days, and then after day 6, the developing embryos need more oxygen, so you can take that plug out, but we do ask you to tape it to the incubator so that it won't get lost. Here's a picture of a hen's reproductive tract. If you look up here in the ovary, that's where the eggs are formed, and they are actually what comes out of the ovary is the yolk. And the yolk goes right into the infundibulum. This part of the hen's reproductive tract, if you stretched it out, it would be 9 feet long, which is amazing. So the sperm would enter the reproductive tract here, and in order to get to where it fertilized the egg, the sperm has to swim up 9 feet of the reproductive tract. If the egg is going to be fertilized, it's going to be fertilized right there, right when the yolk drops into the infundibulum. It's called a funnel. And whether or not that egg is fertilized, the same exact thing happens to it through the hen's reproductive tract. So when we look at an egg from the outside, it looks the same, whether it's fertile or infertile. And all the way through that reproductive tract, different things are happening to it. Different membranes are being added. The egg white is being added. Part of the reproductive tract has some lines inside it, so the egg actually twists as it goes through there. And there's some white stringy things on the edge of the yolk called the chalaza, and they'll look twisted when you crack your egg open and look at it. That's where the twisting happens when the egg turns around. Number 4 on here is called the shell gland, and that's where the shell is applied. And the very last thing that's applied to the egg after the shell is called the cuticle or the bloom, and that's what's antibacterial, and that's why we don't wash the eggs. And here's a picture of an egg and the parts of the egg. But the thing I want you to pay attention to here is called the germinal disc. If the germinal disc is infertile, it just looks like a blob. If the germinal disc is fertile, it's a perfect circle. And when the egg is laid, it's the temperature of the hen's body. But as it reaches air temperature, the egg cools down and an air cell forms. And the older the egg gets, the bigger that air cell grows. And so that's how you can tell a fresh egg from an old egg, because eggs with a big air cell will float. And here's a picture of an infertile egg. You can see that germinal disc, it just looks like a blob. And a fertile egg, it's a complete circle. Let me talk about this for the second graders. Second graders are really concerned when they learn about 4-H embryology. They're very concerned about eating eggs. And they're afraid that when they crack open an egg from the grocery store, it's going to have a baby chick in it, and they shouldn't eat it. Inspection for eggs is so good now that you rarely see a meat spot or a blood spot on an egg. If you did that, it would mean mostly that the hen's body's getting a little bit old, and that blood spot or meat spot came from her body. It is not a baby chick inside the egg. 99% of the eggs that you buy are not fertile and could not be fertile because there's no rooster around in the hatchery. And the minute you put eggs in the refrigerator, they could not develop into baby chicks. When that egg is laid, that germinal disc is awaiting, and the mother hen lays 1 egg a day until she gets enough eggs to sit on. That's called a clutch. And the minute she sits on her egg and her body applies warmth and moisture, then those eggs start to develop. Even though they were laid on different days, it's not day 1 until she sits on those eggs and applies more warmth and moisture. Here's one of our 4-H volunteers who helped deliver eggs to the classroom and helped with the baby chicks after they were returned. Life skills that the teachers tell us that are gained in this program is responsibility, an interest in wildlife and caring for wildlife, and skills in observation and record keeping. All ages enjoy learning about the miracle of life. One of the teachers says to me every year, "I never get tired of this," and I don't get tired of it either. Students' scientific knowledge and skills are enhanced through the use of the 4-H embryology program. And here is a picture of a dry and fluffy bobwhite quail chick. It's important to let the chicks hatch by themselves and not to help them hatch. If they are not strong enough to hatch on their own, they're probably not strong enough to live. If you see a baby chick pip through the eggshell and it seems like it's taking forever for it to hatch, you can take a drop of water with your finger and just drop it on that opening, which will help moisten it and help make it easier to break, but do not help the baby chicks hatch. If your power goes out in the embryology program, the first thing I would do is put a coat or a blanket over the incubator. If it's out for 2 or 3 hours, it probably wouldn't hurt it. If you know it's going to be out for more than 2 or 3 hours, I would take your egg carton that the eggs came in and put it inside the incubator and go ahead and take it home and plug it up at home. Because it has water in it, it's going to leak when you move it, and just make sure the humidity is right when you get back home. For the first 20 days, the humidity should be 45 to 55%. And you just put water in trough number 1. For the last 3 days, the humidity should be 55 to 65%, and you put water in trough number 1 and trough number 2. The temperature should be about 100 degrees the whole time. And I have emailed you the oviparous animal song in the email teacher letter that I sent to you. We have a 4-H dad who raises and releases our bobwhite quail into the wild. He teaches them to be afraid of people. And bobwhite quail are camouflaged. They live in the tall grasses and they eat grass seed. Thank you for being part of 4-H Embryology.